meeting that we just mentioned between President Rouhani and President Trump, myself and the partners who have a role to play in nuclear negotiations will also be fully involved in these negotiations. And I think that this meeting is very important and in the last few days have clarified the situation. A lot of messages have been conveyed. A lot of work has been done between our ministers. I would like to thank our ministers who have been totally involved in these discussions and have set the stage for these discussions and for an agreement. Of course, I want to be very cautious and very modest, but I think that this is going to lead to putting an end to escalation and reaching a suitable solution. So the discussions that we had on Saturday afternoon and Saturday dinner have been very fruitful, and our purpose is to ensure the stability of the region. The idea is to make sure that Iran doesn't get the nuclear weapon and have more visibility in the long term. As far as trade is concerned, we've also shared a lot of analysis and a lot of observations. Later on, I'll go into the details of that. But I think we can say that our discussions have clarified what is legitimate and what the United States feels is an unfair situation. We have international rules that govern international trade. And in this one-page document, we said that it is very good to have a single organization that governs international trade. But so far, this collective body has not been very efficient in raising trade barriers. It has not been efficient enough in solving problems when they occurred. It has not been efficient enough in protecting the intellectual property of our industries. Discussions are underway currently, in particular between President Trump and President Xi. And we have seen, even in just the recent, very recent past, that an agreement can be reached. So we want to reaffirm our desire to change the rules that govern international trade and revamp them so that no one is dealt with unfairly, so that our workers are protected and so that the situation of the past is put to an end. And this is something that we need to work on together. Now, there was a lot of nervousness because of misunderstanding, because some very powerful economic players could have said, what about this digital tax that France has imposed? Well, we have reached a very good agreement, and once again, the solid work that has been done upstream by our ministers has really helped us to make progress. In our economies, we have very unfair situations where some players don't pay taxes, so there is unfair competition with other players, and it is these large multinational players that don't pay taxes which leads to significant instability on the economic front. Is this fair? It is not fair. Of course, we are pushing for international rules on this, even, and at the European level, to 10 countries, France, Italy, even the UK is getting ready to do so, it has decided to do something at the national level, but it is not against any company in particular. It's just to solve the problem. In fact, a lot of French companies will also be impacted by this tax. And some of you have probably heard me say a few months ago that this is only to find a solution, and the aim ultimately is to find an agreement internationally by 2020 to revamp international tax systems within the framework of the OECD to combat harmful trade practices which are also harmful to the U.S. economy. And through this digital tax, on this digital tax, we've worked a lot bilaterally as well, and we have reached an agreement to overcome the hurdles. So we're going to work on a bilateral and multilateral basis to find a solution together. And the day international tax exists on digital services, France will do away with its national tax. And everything that has already been paid under the French tax system will be reimbursed. So the idea is that we need to find a joint agreement in order to address joint international problems. And the situation right now is very negative, and the international tax system definitely needs to be modernized. And I think we will work together in a spirit of cooperation on this. As to Libya, Syria, North Korea, Hong Kong, you will see in the one-page document that we have made considerable headway in the spirit of unity, and we have also done some significant work in as far as the Amazon region is concerned. There have been relations with President Bolsonaro, and we have taken a very ambitious initiative that President Pinheiro presented this morning after having discussed with all the heads of state and government of the region, as we had wished and as President Trump had wished as well. I don't want to go into the details, but I just wanted to highlight these few things that I just mentioned. I just wanted to say that we worked together hand in hand with President Trump over these 2 days. And during this G7, and I would like to thank all my colleagues, in fact, for this, we have managed to reach convergence at unprecedented levels on several issues. And now we're going to continue this work in the weeks and months to follow with a lot of energy. And North Korea knows how strongly President Trump is committed to this issue. There is also the agreement with China, and we're going to work hand in hand on all of the different issues. I would like to thank you, President Trump, for your involvement in the last couple of days. I would like to thank your First Lady, who was by your side and who has been very active side by side with my own spouse, and she has honored us and in our country. She knows how popular she is in our country, and President Trump will be hosting the G7 summit next year, so I'm going to give him the floor so that he can tell us how you intend to organize the G7, and I will be there by your side with the same will and the same determination and the same desire for unity. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you very much, and I think more importantly than anything, I wanted to come up here to say that because the job that President Macron and your wife, by the way, who is a great lady, Bridget, would like to thank Bridget. She has been spectacular, spent a tremendous amount of time with Melania and some of the folks who came in, some of the wives that came in, and they had a great tour of the area, and it's a beautiful area. But I want to thank you very much, Mr. President, for the incredible job you did. This is a truly successful G7. There was tremendous unity. There was great unity. Sometimes I'd read a little bit of false reporting, and I will tell you there was, in fact, we would have stayed for another hour. Nobody wanted to leave. We were accomplishing a lot, but I think more importantly, we were getting along very well. 7 countries, and it really was the G7, and you have been a spectacular leader on this. And I want to thank you, and I want to thank the great country of France. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, my friend.
With that, I think, excuse me, I was, go ahead, let's go.
No, I just wanted to say we will take 2 questions.
Okay.
On each side. Afterwards, I will say goodbye to my friend President Trump. I will leave the room in order for you to follow up with your
If you'd like, we could do 2 each, and then we'll both leave the room. Would you prefer that, or would you prefer 10? I just don't want to have the President of France standing here while I'm answering these absolutely wonderful questions, okay? So why don't we start with a question for France?
These 4 questions are about G7 and U.S.-Franco relations.
And Emmanuel is going to have his own press conference after this.
Exactly.
So that'll be fine. Go ahead. To France, John. To France.
Thank you, Margot. Of course, they are the host country. They should go first. Monsieur le President Macron, China was not on the official agenda, but it was certainly a big part of the discussions here at the G7. Are you concerned that the trade war that exists now between the United States and China could harm the global economy? If you are, did you talk to President Trump about that? And are you also at the same time concerned that if China's current trade practices go unchecked, that a decade from now we could be in a very terrible situation?
Sur ce sujet, nous en avons évidemment.
On this subject, we obviously had lengthy discussions during the session on the world economy yesterday morning, on both subjects. The discussions underway between China and the United States of America, obviously, as we clearly see, create uncertainty, which disturb markets and investors, and during the negotiations will create tensions, which is the case of any discussion. We saw this on different stock markets with which we're familiar. Now the question is to know what the result of these discussions will be. And that's why we considered that it was so important an agreement be found between the two greatest economic powers in the world. President Trump clearly showed us his willingness to arrive at an agreement. We saw just a few hours ago the very positive and encouraging message that could be distilled from this. We see that things are moving. Our deep wish is for an agreement to be found between the United States and China concerning trade, because I think that would be something positive for everyone. Neither the United States nor China is economically or industrially naive. It has to be a balanced agreement that will be good for everyone. And we will be vigilant to see that it's good for the whole world. In that context, our different parameters will be taken on board, and that was one of the subjects of our discussion. What's bad for the world economy is uncertainty, and the quicker an agreement is arrived at, the quicker that uncertainty will dissipate. That's what we discussed yesterday, and that's the American president's wish. In terms of trade practices, I said this earlier. For me, the most effective way forward and the most strategic way forward in settling our trade relations with China is to develop trade, but also to ensure that that trade is part of international trade rules. The problems we sometimes had, we're very familiar with this with the Chinese economy. It's a major economy where there's been lots of investment from the United States, European countries, Canada, and Japan. The problem is respecting intellectual property, dealing with excess capacity, which sometimes unbalances some world markets, and the ability to deal rapidly with conflicts we may have and with unfair situations. Now, we are obliged to see that when this type of trade happens outside of WTO rules, things don't work very well and we're not properly protected. And when we follow WTO rules, the WTO rules as they presently exist haven't allowed us to be protected on these subjects. So what we decided together yesterday morning was to accelerate with a very realistic agenda and to say we're going to change the rules of world trade so that everyone can have free and fair trade, balanced trade, and that the subjects which I've just mentioned, which have sometimes been bad for our economies, can be settled in an international framework which we wish profoundly to change. And we and our different ministers in the different contexts that we're putting forward are going to share these political goals. And to my way of thinking, the way to deal with the practices you have mentioned, certainly the positive agreements that will be arrived at, and also the renewal of our international trade rules, as we said yesterday morning.
Trump, are you satisfied with how far the proposed WTO reforms will go? Because
no, I'm not.
You've spoken about the need for that. And second to that...
We're getting there, Joe. Just to answer that.
Second to that, do you believe that China is sincere about what it said this morning?
Yes.
Or do you think that they are just trying to calm the markets and play for time? Because our sister network, the Fox Business Network, has been told by Chinese sources that they have no plans on going back to where they were in terms of the negotiations this spring on intellectual property, forced technology transfer, ownership. So
we'll see, John.
Do you trust that they are sincere?
I do. I think they want to make a deal very badly. I think that was elevated last night, very late in the night. I see an alert, or you would call it breaking news. And it was that the vice chairman, we're not talking about somebody from China at a low level, the vice chairman of China came out that he wants to see a deal made. He wants it to be made under calm conditions, using the word calm. I agree with him on that. And China has taken a very hard hit over the last number of months. They've lost 3 million jobs. It'll soon be much more than 3 million jobs. Their chain is breaking. The chain is breaking up like nobody's seen before. And once that happens, it's very hard to put it back together. You understand? I think they very much want to make a deal. And the longer they wait, the harder it is to put it back, if it can be put back at all. So I believe they want to do a deal. The tariffs have hit them very hard. In a fairly short period of time, the United States will have collected over $100 billion in tariffs. And I say it again, the media fail to acknowledge it. But if you look at the goods coming in from China, we're talking about China, not other countries. If you look at the goods, they have a power that others don't have. But that power is only good for so long. They've manipulated their currency, they've devalued their currency, and they put a lot of cash into the system. And because of that, the prices have not gone up, or if they've gone up, it's been very little, because they want to keep people working. If the prices go up, they're not going to be able to keep people working. They're not going to be able to compete. It's a brilliant market. It's a brilliant, brilliant market, the world market. A lot of markets are brilliant. And frankly, I think that China cannot, I don't know, maybe they can, maybe they can't. I don't think they can do that. And I think they're very smart. And I think President Xi is a great leader who happens to be a brilliant man. And he can't lose 3 million jobs in a very short period of time. And that's going to be magnified many times over. And it's going to break down the Chinese system of trade. And he can't do that. So when you say, do you think they want to? Maybe they want to and maybe they don't. But I think they want to make a deal. I'm not sure they have a choice. And I don't say that as a threat. I don't think they have a choice. In the meantime, the United States, which has never collected 10 cents from China, will, in a fairly short period of time, be over $100 billion in tariffs. So I think they want to make a deal. Very badly. Okay. Go ahead.
Deuxième question.
Second question.
Messieurs les Présidents, Mathieu Coach, BFM.
Mr. President, you've just declared that you've created the conditions for a meeting between President Trump and President Rouhani. Does that mean that France, for instance, might be a mediator in that meeting? And more concretely, what did you discuss in terms of that possible agreement with Iran? Then a question for Mr. Trump. Are you ready to lift or to soften American sanctions on Iranian oil exports? And would you be ready to meet President Rouhani? Thank you.
Sur la première question.
On the first question, the terms of the discussion are quite simple. An agreement was signed in 2015, on July 14th. We call it the JCPOA. And that agreement set forth guarantees for the international community, including the signatories of that agreement, saying that Iran would no longer enrich uranium over a certain period of time. I'm simplifying this, but up to 2025, in exchange for reopening many economic sectors and massive investment, largely made by the United States. That agreement had a twofold advantage: stability and security, and also reopening, economically speaking, which was good for Iran. This agreement also had drawbacks and shortcomings. French negotiators in 2015 were the most determined, and France was the country that hesitated most to sign this agreement because we considered we needed as many guarantees as possible. President Trump, during his campaign, made a commitment to those who voted for him to be more demanding and tougher because he considered that this agreement was insufficient, which caused him to leave it. Today, because of the sanctions made by President Trump, the Iranian economy is having serious consequences and a serious slowdown. And that situation very clearly is the aspect, we might say the positive side of things, from one standpoint, is creating pressure and therefore the necessary conditions to improve the terms of an agreement. On the other hand, it's leading to reactions in Iran who are saying, well, we've signed this agreement, but those who have signed it are not respecting its terms, and so we're starting symbolically to enrich uranium, and they risk that they're going to go further still and leave the JCPOA. So, given the two goals that we have, where are we going with this? We need to be sure that Iran will never get a nuclear weapon and that there will be no flare-ups in the region. And so what we discussed very concretely was to see how we could improve very considerably, or really, in fact, build a new nuclear agreement with Iran. President Trump was very clear, saying that we would need a much longer time frame for it, that there needed to be surveillance of many more sites, and this is how we can build a much further reaching agreement in terms of our security demands. And on the other hand, we need to convince the Iranians to go in that direction, and we can do that if we give them economic compensation of some form. If we make some movement in terms of lines of credit or reopening certain economic sectors. I can't tell you today publicly more about this because anything I will tell you in detail will jeopardize the conversations we're going to have. But this is basically what we're discussing. On the basis of our initiative, there's also a Japanese initiative. I'm talking in total transparency with the president, but we agreed on a strategic goal, and I want us to go further in this framework and to make proposals. At a given point in time, there will have to be a meeting between the American and the Iranian presidents, and I would wish that in coming weeks, such a meeting take place. France will play a role together with the other signatories who are our partners in the JCPOA. But after that, we'll need to create the necessary conditions because we'll have the necessary visibility for this agreement to be signed and sealed and for this meeting between the two presidents to take place. So I would rather talk about concerted initiatives and exchanges rather than mediation, because at the end of the day, we have constant exchanges with President Trump. I share his goals. Sometimes we say we don't agree on methods, but I want to get there. I want to have an agreement. And I think there's been a true change. This morning, President Rouhani showed himself to be open to this meeting happening. And President Trump has been saying for weeks that he's being demanding, he's being tough, he's put forward sanctions, but I'm ready to have a meeting to make a deal. And I think that we're making progress. I want this meeting to happen, and I want there to be an agreement between the United States and Iran. And France will play the role it is meant to play together with the United Kingdom, with Germany, and all of the other signatory powers and the permanent members of the Security Council.
Iran is a country that is not the same country that it was 2.5 years ago when I came into office. Iran was the #1 state of terror throughout the world. There were 18 sites of confliction in my first week when I spoke with the folks at the Pentagon, including lots of generals and lots of other military experts. 18 sites of confliction, meaning 18 sites of big problems. Every one of them was backed by Iran, or in some cases actually using Iranian soldiers, but at a minimum Iranian wealth, much of it given in the ridiculous deal where they were given $150 billion plus $1.8 billion in cash, and they used that money for some bad purposes. With that being said, I think that Iran is a country of tremendous potential. We're not looking for leadership change. We're not looking for that kind of change. This country has been through that many times before. That doesn't work. We're looking for no nuclear weapons, no ballistic missiles, and a longer period of time. Very simple. We can have it done in a very short period of time. And I really believe that Iran can be a great nation. I'd like to see that happen. But they can't have nuclear weapons. Okay? Thank you. Excuse me? If the circumstances were correct or the right, I would certainly agree to that. But in the meantime, they have to be good players. You understand what that means? And they can't do what they were saying they're going to do, because if they do that, they're going to be met with really very violent force. We have no choice. So I think they're going to be good. I really think they'd like to. And by the way, President Macron told me every step that he was making yesterday. A lot of you said, oh, he came in. He told me long before he came in what was happening, I didn't think it was appropriate to meet yesterday, too soon, and things have to be worked out first. But President Macron told me exactly what was happening, who was coming, what time they were coming, where they were going to meet. And after the meeting, he told me exactly what happened. And I think he had a very positive meeting. Prime Minister Abe of Japan, also a large purchaser of oil from Iran. He was also very much involved, and look, he knows everybody there, so he was a very, very positive force. But I have to tell you, the president's done an excellent job, and we're going to see how it all turns out. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. I say it all the time about everything. Maybe it works, and maybe it doesn't. But I'll tell you what, we made a ridiculous deal. We gave him $150 billion, gave him $1.8 billion, and we got nothing. We got nothing. And by the way, that agreement was so short-term that it expires in a very short period of time. With a country, you don't make a deal that short. Countries last for long times, and you don't do short-term deals, especially when you're paying that kind of money. So I have good feelings about Iran. I have good feelings that it'll work. I know many Iranians living in New York City. I have many friends from Iran. They're incredible people, incredible people. So the last thing I'd like to see is a big problem, but we have to do what we have to do. Okay? Go ahead, please. No, you first. Go ahead. No, go ahead. Yes.
Thank you. President Macron, did you seek President Trump's permission before you invited Foreign Minister Zarif, or did you simply inform him that he was coming?
Thanks for this very precise question. But to be very clear, and we are part of the JCPOA. We decided to remain in this deal. So we are very much interested by the situation as a sovereign country. That's why we want the different parties to move. On the other side, as President Trump made it very clear over the summer, we never spoke on behalf of other countries. We just tested some solutions and to see if we can find an agreement with different countries. So we took an initiative this summer to make a proposal, a technical one. I got the reaction from Iran through President Zarif's visit on Friday morning in Paris. After the discussion we had at the G7 dinner on Saturday evening, I thought that it was very clear about where we can go together. So the day after, I decided to invite, as friends, Minister Zarif. So I informed, before making it, I informed President Trump that it was my idea not to involve the United States, not to say this is on behalf of you, of everybody, but to say, as friends, I think it would be a good idea to ask him to go back and try to negotiate something separately. So I did it on my own. I informed, before making it, President Trump. He was informed at each minute about the situation. And the idea for me was, in case of structural move and important move and appropriate solutions, perhaps to have meetings between ministers, not at President Trump's level, because President Trump's level is President Rouhani. So this is my precise answer. This is a French initiative, but made by a clear information of the US President before, information as well of the three Europeans, and each time I informed President Trump in order to monitor the situation and to appreciate together if something more was adapted.
I have to say the JCPOA was a bad deal, should not have been entered into. A lot of things could have happened that would have been much different. They're allowed to test ballistic missiles. You're not allowed to go to various sites to check. And some of those sites are the most obvious sites for the creation or the making of nuclear weapons. And those things have to be changed, and other things have to be changed. And I will tell you, I have very good feelings about it. I think that we're going to do something. It may not be immediately, but I think ultimately we're going to do something. As I said, Iran is a much different country than it was 2.5 years ago. And we can get that back, and I'd encourage it. I actually had friends years ago, many years ago, they were in the real estate business, and they were in Iran, and they were building houses and building housing and building office buildings and apartment houses. And They did very well. They made a lot of money. And to this day, they're not exactly the youngest developers anymore, but I tell you, they were young when they went over there. They made a lot of money, and they loved the people, and they loved what was going on. And it's a country with tremendous potential. I also say that, by the way, with respect to North Korea. Kim Jong-un, who I've gotten to know extremely well, First Lady has gotten to know Kim Jong-un, and I think she'd agree with me. He is a man with a country that has tremendous potential. You're in between China, Russia, and South Korea. People want to get to South Korea. They got to get there somehow, and if they're going to do anything other than essentially fly, they want to go through. So railroads and everything else, so many things want to happen there. I think that North Korea has tremendous economic potential, and I think that Kim Jong-un sees that. He would be the leader, and I think he sees the tremendous potential that it's got. With respect to Iran, same thing. Iran is incredible people, an incredible country potentially, location that's a little rough neighborhood, but eventually it's going to be a beautiful neighborhood. I think that it's going to work out. And I really believe that those countries that went into the original deal, that more and more are agreeing with what I did. But I think those countries are going to be saying thank you someday. I hope they're going to be saying, including France, including the president, because I think we did the right thing. I know we did the right thing. If for no other reason, it's just too short. It's almost expiring, if you think about it. And somebody said, well, you'll go and make an extension. No. They're great negotiators. Look at what they did to get the deal. Look at what they did to John Kerry and to President Obama. Look what happened, where they're bringing plane loads of cash. Plane loads, big planes, 757s, Boeing 757s, coming in loaded up with cash. What kind of a deal is that? So I think a lot of good things are going to happen. And I just want to say this because I've spoken a lot with the president this last 2.5 days. We've never had a better relationship. We had a lunch that lasted for quite a while that many of you got to see. It was the two of us. No staff, no anything. He wasn't trying to impress his people. I wasn't trying to impress his people. We were just trying to impress each other. And I'll tell you what, it was the best period of time we've ever had. And we accomplished a lot. I don't mean just, gee whiz, wasn't that nice? He's a very capable man. He's doing a great job for France. He did an incredible job for the G7, and I just want to thank you. And you go ahead to your news conference, and very special. This was a very special, very unified 2.5 days, and I want to thank you for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I will leave the floor and the press conference to President Trump, and I will wait for the end of your own press conference. Voilà, finalement. Je ferai une conférence de presse. Je vous laisse la poser au président. Allez-y.
Well, I don't want to give anything away, but we saw your wife, the First Lady, drink a glass of French wine yesterday. So can you perhaps give up on your threat to put sanctions on French wine? Because if we've understood correctly, you have arrived at an agreement on taxing digital firms. Could you confirm that there has been an agreement between you and France on taxing digital firms?
Confirm that the First Lady loved your French wine, okay? All right? She loved your French wine. So thank you very much. That's fine. You go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Merci à vous. I will wait for the end of this press conference to have the press conference of the presidency. I will leave the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job. This is worse than you are. I can't believe it. Jonathan.